Ask yourself this: why would Ferrari, one of the most secretive, tradition-heavy, image-obsessed teams in F1, voluntarily bench their golden boy Charles Leclerc? Not once, but twice this season, and not just for simulator tests, not just for private track sessions, but on a race weekend in front of the world in FP1 again. This isn't about junior development. It's not just about mileage for Dino Beganovic. This is Ferrari broadcasting something, quietly, calculated, strategic. And if you know where to look, you'll realize it's not Beganovic we should be watching. It's what his presence says about Leclerc and Hamilton. Let's break it wide open. Here's the truth nobody in the paddock wants to say out loud. Charles Leclerc's seat is no longer untouchable. In 2024, that would have been unthinkable. Charles was the chosen son, the emotional core of the Ferrari brand. He was the heir, the hype, the highlight reel. But 2025, now he's the guy being subbed out for a 21-year-old with 2 F2 podiums. And don't tell me it's just obligatory rookie mileage, because Ferrari has options. They could have replaced Carlos Sainz in FP1s last year. They could rotate with other junior drivers, but they're deliberately choosing Leclerc's chassis, the reference car, not the experimental one. And here's why it matters. Ferrari is no longer building around Leclerc. They're future-proofing. And that future has a name: Lewis Hamilton. The SF25 is being developed around a 7-time world champion's feedback, and Beganovic is being groomed not to complement Leclerc, but to replace a system Ferrari quietly thinks no longer delivers under pressure. This isn't about 2025. This is about who's driving the red car in 2027. And the message to Charles is brutal. We're testing your replacement, right next to you, in your garage, wearing your race suit. Now let's talk Dino. Forget the press fluff. Ignore the PR buzzwords. Dino Beganovic isn't just another F2 junior. He's a lab project, meticulously developed by Ferrari since 2020. And unlike older Ferrari juniors, remember Callum Ilott, Robert Schwartzman, Antonio Fuoco? Beganovic isn't being used to tick boxes. He's being prepared to take over. And here's why that's terrifying, especially for Leclerc fans. Dino doesn't drive like Charles. He drives like Hamilton with more compliance. Early rotation, low steering correction, calm on exits. He's a mechanical engineer's dream. His input traces are so clean it looks like a simulation. This isn't a kid easing in to F1. It's a kid executing a program Ferrari has been building since 2020. A driver who's already been tested in TPCs, who's now done Bahrain and Spielberg in the real car, and who just happens to be growing right as Charles Leclerc is starting to look replaceable. And don't forget the timing. Beganovic gets Leclerc's seat at the Red Bull Ring. Hamilton's first race weekend at Ferrari. That's not scheduling, that's a power signal. Here's what you won't hear on Sky or F1 TV. Ferrari is quietly operating on a 3-driver plan. Hamilton is the figurehead, the validator. Leclerc is the current bet, but increasingly the compromised one. And Beganovic is the insurance policy, the one who could be developed in the shadows and deployed when Charles fails to deliver wins. Not poles, not sympathy points, but actual championships. Because Ferrari isn't just reacting anymore. They've watched Red Bull run a ruthless driver model for years. And with Mercedes struggling and McLaren rising, the Scuderia knows there's no more room for sentiment. So they're hedging, they're testing, and they're doing it right under Leclerc's nose. This is no longer about who's best right now. It's about who will be the best weapon in 2027. And if you ask me, Ferrari isn't just auditioning Dino Beganovic. They're sending a warning to Charles Leclerc. You're not the future, you're the control group. Max Verstappen is 1 penalty point away from a race ban. Let that sink in. 1 point. The 3-time world champion, the most dominant force in modern Formula One, could be watching from the garage with a headset instead of leading from pole because of a few bad judgments and a desperate team protest that reeked of fear. Red Bull says they're protecting Max. But here's the question no one's asking. If Verstappen is so dominant, why does Red Bull suddenly look so fragile? Because what we saw in Canada, the safety car farce, the protest, the whispers of gamesmanship, wasn't the behavior of a team in control. It was a team that's rattled. Forget Mercedes, forget McLaren. Red Bull's biggest enemy might now be paranoia, and that should terrify anyone who thinks dynasties are untouchable. Red Bull didn't just protest George Russell for overtaking under the safety car. They claimed unsportsmanlike intent. They painted a picture of Russell playing psychological chess, breaking just enough to bait Max into overtaking and triggering a rule violation. Let's be honest, Russell's move was cheeky, but was it dirty? Was it unusual? Was it worthy of a double protest? Absolutely not. And that's where it gets interesting, because for a team that's supposed to be unshakable, Red Bull looked spooked. Why? Because Verstappen is sitting on 11 penalty points. And if he had gotten one more in Canada, he'd have faced a one-race ban. And Red Bull knows they don't have a backup plan. This isn't a team playing to win. It's a team playing not to lose. Christian Horner, who built Red Bull into a championship machine, spent more time after the race talking about gamesmanship and race director briefings than he did Max's actual performance. Why? Because they're looking over their shoulder now, not ahead. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about the points. It's about control. Red Bull used to walk into a paddock and dictate terms. Now, they're begging the stewards to watch Mercedes more closely. It's not just defensive, it's desperate. That protest wasn't about George Russell. It was about Max, and about a team so afraid of losing him for one weekend, they're now questioning everything, including themselves. Let's talk facts. Verstappen has 11 penalty points. If he gets one more in Austria, Red Bull's home race, he's out for the next round. And that is why this is bigger than a brake check. Because this weekend isn't just about racing fast, it's about not making a single mistake. And that changes everything. When you're thinking about staying clean, you're not thinking about winning, you're thinking about surviving. And Max Verstappen, for all his brilliance, is not a survive kind of driver. He's a dominate or die driver. He races on instinct, on aggression, on threat. So now Red Bull is trying to cage a lion and pretend it's still hunting. And it gets worse. Because this kind of internal panic spreads, it clouds judgment, it poisons strategy. You start second-guessing tire calls. You hesitate to challenge track limits. You lose edge, then you lose time, and then you lose the race. Just look at the numbers. In the last 3 races, Verstappen has faced more media questions about penalty points than about pole laps. Red Bull's constructors' lead is gone. Max has scored 95% of the team's points because the second car is nowhere. McLaren's rising, Mercedes is rallying, Ferrari is still hunting. And Red Bull, they're filing complaints and whispering about fairness. That's not domination, that's disintegration. And Jolyon Palmer, who isn't exactly a rebel, even said it. Red Bull worrying about other teams this much? That's the bigger worry. He's right. Because once the invincibles start looking vulnerable, the grid stops fearing them. And when fear disappears, so does the crown. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is Red Bull's most important weekend of the year. Not because it's Austria, not because it's their home race, but because it's their test. Can they still race aggressively without imploding? Can Max stay sharp without falling into hesitation? Can the most dominant team of the last 5 years resist turning into its own worst enemy? If Verstappen gets through Austria clean, the pressure lifts. 2 penalty points expire. The risk vanishes. But if he doesn't, if something goes wrong and that 1-point trigger is pulled, Red Bull's fear becomes prophecy. The dynasty cracks, and the rest of the grid, they'll smell blood, and they won't ask questions. Because in Formula One, no one cares why the lion hesitated. They just take the shot. On paper, it was a simple misjudgment, a braking mistake. Lando Norris ran into the back of Oscar Piastri during a late race overtake in Montreal. He apologized. The team smoothed it over. Case closed. Right? Wrong. Because if you think this was just about a miscalculation in the braking zone, you're missing the real story. This wasn't just a clash between teammates. It was a crack in the foundation of McLaren's resurgence. A quiet battle for hierarchy, for team ownership, for control of the orange machine they've both been tasked with driving. But only one of them will lead. This is the part no one's saying out loud. And today, we're pulling back the curtain. In Formula One, every team says the same thing. Let them race until they don't. Behind closed doors, there are always rules of engagement. Some are written, most aren't. At McLaren, rule number 1 is sacred. Don't crash into your teammate. That rule isn't about damage. It's about identity. It's about the message it sends when a team fails to control its own drivers. In Montreal, Lando broke that rule. He knew it the second it happened. You could hear it in his voice on the radio. The apology wasn't PR, it was personal. He wasn't just apologizing to Oscar, he was apologizing to the engineers, the strategists, the crew who've backed him since day one. Because for Norris, McLaren is family. But here's the brutal truth nobody wants to say. Sometimes the people closest to you hurt you the most, not out of malice, but out of pressure. Lando Norris is under pressure to beat a teammate who's becoming more clinical, more efficient, more immune to emotion. Piastri isn't a storm, he's a scalpel, and that scares people. In Montreal, the error wasn't just about timing, it was about frustration, about watching your teammate hold track position when you believe you're the faster car, about a subtle shift in team dynamics that Lando felt but hadn't spoken about until it exploded on track. And Oscar? Oscar did what great drivers do. He didn't escalate. He didn't retaliate. He just outscored his teammate again. Let's be clear. McLaren handled the fallout well. Andrea Stella did his job. Zach Brown said the right things. But you know what engineers care about? Data. And what the data shows behind the soft apologies and media-friendly soundbites is a growing pattern. Since 2024, Piastri has been getting closer to Norris on Saturdays and beating him more frequently on Sundays. He's calmer in high-pressure moments. He follows strategy with precision. And when he's under threat, he doesn't blink. This is the stuff that team bosses notice. And when Lando collided with him, it wasn't just a racing incident, it was a litmus test, a moment to see how each driver handles adversity. Piastri? He absorbed it, dealt with it, moved on. Norris? He spiraled, then recovered, which speaks volumes, but also raises questions. Let's be honest, this is the closest Lando's ever come to losing ownership of the team, and you can feel it in the way he speaks. The words are careful, measured, respectful, but not confident, because deep down he knows Oscar isn't just fast, he's emotionally bulletproof, and that makes him very, very dangerous in a long campaign. One engineer inside the team reportedly said after Canada, "The kid doesn't flinch. That's rare. It's Fernando levels of detachment." That's terrifying praise, because if you're Lando Norris, what does that mean for your future? Here's what most people don't get. Intra-team crashes don't just cost points. They fracture belief, not just in the garage, in the boardroom, in the strategy meetings, in the minds of the mechanics who have to decide which setup gets optimized and which one gets copied. In Montreal, Lando Norris lost more than a race. He lost the psychological edge. Piastri didn't beat him by overtaking him, he beat him by surviving him. He proved that he's the one who stays calm, the one who doesn't crack, the one who doesn't need to force the issue, because eventually you'll beat yourself trying to beat him. And Lando knows it. He said all the right things. But the next time they're wheel to wheel, no team orders, no engineers in the ear, the truth will show itself. And McLaren? McLaren will have to pick a side, because one of these drivers is building for the future. The other is trying not to lose what he already had.